Hello everyone, xForts here, and welcome to Chainsaw Man Chapter 104 and 103 review and discussion, because I did not review 103 2 weeks ago, and that's because, surprisingly, I didn't have much to say about it. When the chapter came out, I read it and I was really excited to see Denji's character being explored again, but then I was a bit confused on where Fujimoto was going with it. And I just wanted to see more of his character and where that chapter was building up to, because honestly, the first, 9 pages of that chapter were the news broadcast, and then you just have Denji and Yoshida at the cafe talking a little bit, so I figured if I was going to make a whole review dedicated to Denji's character development in part 2, I wanted to wait until we had a little bit more context and saw more of them, because that last chapter really did feel like it was just building up to another moment and leading into something. So I kind of waited. Sorry if you guys thought I was ending the reviews or anything like that. No, sadly, I'll still be reviewing Chainsaw Man. But anyways, yeah, so Denji is back. We're seeing more of his character, and that's really exciting. As well as in this chapter, we see the number one thing I was looking forward to the most in Chainsaw Man Part 2, the meeting of Asa and Denji. I did not expect it to happen this soon, but it's still very exciting. It flows very naturally. It's really awesome. These two chapters kick ass, so let's get right into it, guys. Chainsaw Man Chapter 103 and 104. So thank you guys for joining me. I'm definitely glad to be back reviewing Chainsaw Man. So briefly covering 103, I already talked about it a little bit, so I really like how in the first page of this chapter, it illustrates the main ways that the public have attached themselves to Chainsaw Man through celebration, commercialization, and disapproval. So what are the 3 categories people fall under, and how Chainsaw Man has become this public figure, almost like a political figure. And this imagery carries over into pretty much the first half of the chapter, as we see various interviews from civilians giving their opinions on Chainsaw Man, following his fight against the Cockroach Devil, with Fujimoto further exploring the concept of Chainsaw Man as a public figure, and creating social divide through difference in opinion, as well as some people don't even think he's real and just propaganda. Sort of those like different sections you have of political things where people are like, oh, I'm for it, I'm against it, it's not even real, it doesn't exist, it's a conspiracy. So kind of interesting the way Fujimoto is writing Chainsaw Man in the world. And when I was reading this, as we see 7-8 different people, I was like, okay, this is kind of going on for a while, but then the camera finally lands on Denji, which was a nice surprise. It's like, okay, this is where it's going. So when we see Denji, he's surprisingly just as immature as ever, hyping himself up and even trying to give his phone number out on live TV for any girls interested in Chainsaw Man, while not exactly giving away his identity. And this lack of growth is expressed throughout the rest of the chapter, and Denji and Yoshida share a conversation. At first, Denji claims to not even remember Yoshida or the international assassins, because as we know, Denji has a tendency to repress traumatic memories, as well as he's still completely broke and mindlessly obsessed with getting a girlfriend, so not too far off from Denji at the beginning of part 1, which I saw a lot of people were upset at Denji or surprised at him for not changing his ways and growing as a character after his experience with Makima in part 1, and I definitely share the sentiment, as at the end of part 1, Denji was set up to become a more mature and responsible person, having responsibility over Makima's dogs, but also the reborn control devil, Nayuta, who is Denji's responsibility to look after and care for her in a way that she is able to have a loving and supporting family, so she doesn't turn into Makima 2.0, as well as the whole reason Denji was able to defeat Makima in the first place was because of growth, because he realized she never cared about him as a person, and was able to see through the veil of his own naivety. So it definitely is surprising to see Denji sort of regressing in a way from the end of part 1, although I can't really say regress because we never saw him grow as a character in the way he would actually care for Nayuta, so I guess we can't really blame him for changing in a way he never actually changed. But I definitely think Fujimoto is subverting us in a way here, because that's definitely the way it was set up at the end of part 1, as well as in part 2, we haven't seen Nayuta yet, who is a massive plot point, and I think if we ever see her and Denji again together, which we have to, unless it's just brushed over where it's like, oh yeah, Denji threw her onto someone else, or she's someone else's responsibility, which would just defeat the whole purpose of that ending in part 1, because it's like, okay, yeah, Denji had to go through those trials and tribulations to defeat Makima, and now it's his responsibility to make sure someone like Makima can never exist again. So if we ever see those two together, which should be soon, I think we'll definitely see a different side of Denji's personality, more of like a parental figure almost, being a lot more responsible and taking care of this person, but for now, we don't see any of that, so I think that will be coming in the future though. So getting more into Denji's character, that surprised a lot of people in chapter 103 specifically, is because he says his current motivation is to get a girlfriend through the name of Chainsaw Man, as apparently the only reason he is fighting devils is to risk exposing his identity, and have that praise and affection from all the girls he wants. And lastly for 103 is Yoshida's character. We talked a lot about him and what his true purpose is in the story, why he's going to school, why he's joining the devil hunting club. Is he aware of Denji? Is he trying to get closer to Denji, and a lot of people suspected he was on some sort of mission. And he does confirm here that he is on a mission from an organization, which as far as we know, is not the Devil Hunting Bureau, rather something entirely different that might have larger goals and be even bigger than the Devil Hunting Bureau in terms of like control over people, I guess. So we finally have that confirmation from Yoshida, which is really nice and kind of like makes me a little bit more interested in his character and where he went after the events of part 1, because he's now a part of this new organization that has different goals in mind compared to the Devil Hunters, which is that they're trying to keep the secret of Chainsaw Man's identity like in control. They don't want people to find out that Denji is Chainsaw Man. I don't exactly know the reason for this, although I can think of a few. One, it could lead to another international assassins incident or put a target on Denji's head and just cause a lot of chaos. But this unnamed organization seems to be more involved in the control of society, sort of like an Illuminati situation or something like that, considering how focused they are on Chainsaw Man specifically, who at this point is a massive public figure as well as arguably the most dangerous devil alive. So I think that sums up about everything for 103. I told you guys it was pretty brief. I didn't have much to say on it as I just wanted to see where it was going after that. So getting now into 104, fresh off the press, we surprisingly switched to Asa's perspective. So I was like, oh god, I waited so long to talk about Denji, now we're right back to Asa, but we're not with her for very long. It's definitely like a split Asa-Denji chapter, which is really nice. And we pick up with Asa a little bit after her encounter with Chainsaw Man and the Cockroach Devil, probably later that night. So we know that Yoro has some sort of vendetta against Chainsaw Man from something that happened in the past. So Yoro is really upset that she wasn't able to control Asa when he arrived, as well as the fact that she was saved by him at all. And this leads into some interesting lore and world building from Yoro, explaining how long ago she had fought Chainsaw Man, which ended with a part of her being eaten and weakening her power, but not completely erasing her, which is most likely the reason why War Devil appeared the way it did in chapter 98, being pretty weak and needing the help of a human, not being its whole self. Yoro also says that the last war was the World War, which I assume is World War I, and since her fight with Chainsaw Man, war has become a thing of fiction, only in movies and video games, and people began to forget the terrors of real war, and she began to grow even weaker over the years. Although Makima, who claims to be able to remember erased devils, had said in part 1 that World War II and nuclear weapons did exist at some point, but were erased, which are apparently different devils from the War Devil. So I'm not sure who to believe here, because history is a weird thing in Chainsaw Man, because everyone's memories can be erased so easily. Who knows what sort of events or devils existed at any point in history, which is kind of scary when you realize that no one in the world really knows their true history, as world-changing events like World War II and even volcanic eruptions can be completely erased from people's memories and just written out of history. So maybe Yoro herself has forgotten about the wars that transpired after World War I that she wasn't the cause of. So this might provide some interesting insight on Yoro herself. And maybe she isn't necessarily the War Devil, as in the fear of all conflict and wars, but rather she was birthed out of the fear of World War I, meaning she was born around 1915, 1916, somewhere around there. And when the fear of war was at its highest, when the entire world was like, oh shit, it's going down, and that maybe that caused birth to the War Devil itself. Because she says, the last war was the World War. She doesn't know about World War II, or, that was another devil that Makima had mentioned. I hope that doesn't get this video age restricted. Maybe I'll bleep it. So this would mean that the battle Yoro was talking about against Chainsaw Man would have occurred sometime in the 1920s or 1930s after World War I, because she had said that that was the last war that people remembered, at least according to her. So it's very interesting, some insight into Pochita's activity on Earth before he met Denji. So again, history is really weird to recall, because it's like, what the hell actually is the time period? If Makima says World War II did happen, then it was erased. Nuclear weapons happened, it was erased. According to Yoro, World War I was the last war. No one has known war since. So it's like every single individual probably well, not every single individual, but besides devils, like most people probably have a completely false sense of actual history. And then there's certain devils that remember certain things, and apparently Makima can remember everything. But yeah, so I don't know what is going on with the wars. I don't even know the truth behind Yoro's identity now that the fact that she can only remember the World War and none of the other ones. So, but anyways, it's probably best to not think too much about how history transpired in events, because it's so conflicting and things just can get erased out of nowhere. But this sort of leads into the larger idea of Yoro's motivation for seeking out Chainsaw Man, which is for revenge mostly, but also to reclaim her powers, as she doesn't want to be forgotten and erased from the world, which I guess is something all devils seek to some extent. So even if her existence means millions of human lives, she doesn't really care because she is a devil, so it makes sense that her number one priority is self-preservation. And this scene ends with Asa having a slight reflection on Chainsaw Man, as he did just save her, as well as he is the enemy of her enemy, Yoru, which is changing her mind on Chainsaw Man just a little bit. So after just a few pages with Asa, we then switch back to Denji as the two are sharing the chapter, and we can see Denji in school simping to levels yet unseen before, as Denji is scrapping together some extra cash by letting girls use him as a human chair. Fujimoto really expressing his interest for, putting women in a higher position than men, making it very obvious, like very Fujimoto. So although Denji didn't have massive character development like a lot of people expected, it's still nice to see Denji just being Denji, and at least he's not a depressed shell of himself after the events of part 1 and everything that happened to him and his friends. So if this is who Denji wants to be, and this is what's helping him continue moving forward after all that trauma, I mean, good for him. And also remember too that this time skip is like only a year, maybe a little bit less than a year too. So although Denji did go through that whole thing with Makima, he's still a teenager, and years-wise he hasn't grown too much. So at this age, being in high school, it still would make sense for him to be like head over heels with every girl, always horny, always just thinking about getting a girlfriend. So he definitely isn't gonna grow up and become like a mature ass man, like, being like, not interested in anyone, just raising this child Mayuta. So it definitely makes sense for Denji to still, be sort of the same he was in part 1, because he hasn't aged that much. He's just kind of lived through a lot of experiences. And as we saw in chapter 103 and early in this chapter, Denji doesn't really seem to be handling those experiences and traumas in the best way, not recognizing Yoshida, sort of denying the things that happened in his past. So this might be just even more building for Denji's character to show that he is feeling a lot of sadness, and he's grieving from all the things that happened, and he's just not able to show it, and maybe just being silly and being a class clown is the way for him to sort of overcome those emotions, which I think is something that a lot of people can maybe share that sentiment with. So while we see Denji at school, we also see that he is approached by Yoshida, who returns Denji's student ID to him, as he's been leaving it on purpose on the scenes where he fights devils, in the hopes to leak his identity in a natural way. Although Yoshida is even more serious now than in 103, and gives him a stern warning to stop what he's doing and keep his identity a secret, otherwise he'll have to use force. Although Denji is still desperate for a girlfriend, and he says he's going to get found out no matter what. Which, when you think about it, is character development, but in a very sad way, as Makima has conditioned Denji that the only way anyone would ever care for him is if they saw him as Chainsaw Man and knew he was Chainsaw Man. So Denji doesn't even think it's a possibility that any girl would like him or be interested in him just for himself. He thinks that the only thing people would care about him for is the fact that he's Chainsaw Man. And that's definitely some, residual influence of Makima, that she sort of conditioned that and ingrained that into him, that like, you're nothing, you're less than human, the only thing that's important about you is Chainsaw Man. So we see Makima's influence carrying on to him throughout part 2 here, where like Denji doesn't even try to talk to girls on his own. The only thing he's trying to do here is just like expose his identity. So Yoshida knows how stubborn Denji is, and for the sake of his mission, he says he'll help him get a girlfriend, which is probably easier than using force. And right then I knew exactly where this chapter was going, as Denji says his type of girl is the one who's desperate for a boyfriend, and who does that remind Yoshida of? None other than ASA Mitaka. Well, actually Yoru was the one who asked Yoshida out, but either way, in the next page, just boom, immediately we see Asa and Denji side by side, which is all happening so fast, but still in a natural way that brings these two together because of their personalities and the past events building to this moment. So you guys know I have been waiting for this moment. I've been saying it for weeks, and this is definitely our story, our woo, yeah baby, this is what I've been talking about, this is what it's all about moment in Chainsaw Man Part 2 right now, where we have Bird and Dog, War and Chainsaw finally crossing paths and having that interaction, and thankfully not immediately recognizing each other either, and building that human connection first before potentially becoming enemies. So thank you, Fujimoto. It's so early too. What is this? We're like 7 chapters into part 2 and already, so god damn. The way it was being written in the beginning seemed like it was going to build up further and further, but it's happening pretty soon. So again, this is just Chainsaw Man pacing, I guess, getting into it, but it's also done in like a supernatural way, like I mentioned earlier, where it was the two characters' personalities and their motivations that brought them together. So definitely not forced or anything like that, and yeah, just awesome. So Yoshida is kind of wingmanning Denji through this interaction, as they're just all hanging out as friends, and Yoshida pushes the conversation towards something they might have in common, which is Chainsaw Man, as the two express their opinions, with Asa saying she's actually become more neutral towards him, coming full circle from the beginning of the chapter, recognizing that Chainsaw Man is the enemy of my enemy, so maybe he's my friend, but she's of course not completely sold yet. But I still like how her opinion is changing, and it's a step towards her being more sympathetic towards Denji if she ever did find out he was really Chainsaw Man, being able to see the human side of the devil and potentially even a human that she likes. But before we get too excited about about this Denji Asa ship and the two of them having a friendship and potentially even being boyfriend and girlfriend in the future. Asa then starts to mention all the things she doesn't like about Chainsaw Man and why she hated him, and how, a bunch of rumors about him too, how he eats people and eats animals and he's filthy, he's disgusting. Some of the things are true. It's like, oh yeah, he's just so blatantly horny. He only saves hot girls, and Denji's like, huh, maybe she's onto something. So yeah, she's just listing off all the reasons why she shouldn't like Chainsaw Man and why he's an awful person. It sort of flusters Denji a little bit because he's like, oh my god, this is a girl Yoshida brought me to that might potentially like me. She wants a boyfriend, and I could be the boyfriend here. So he's like, you know what? I'm just gonna tell her. I just gotta spill the beans. I just gotta let out. He's like, you know what? I am Chainsaw Man. And she just looks at him like, she calls him a loser. She looks at him, she says, loser. Because of course, Denji, by the way, this whole chapter, Denji's wearing a goddamn Chainsaw Man t-shirt. So it's like, yeah, of course she's not gonna believe him. He, like, this fanboy, he's like, oh, I love Chainsaw Man. He's awesome. He's like really fanboying him, being like, all that stuff's wrong. No. So in Asa's eyes, Denji is just a complete Chainsaw Man fanboy wearing the shirt. And then he's like, you know what? I'm Chainsaw Man. She's like, of course she doesn't believe him. And although that's not particularly the way I wanted their friendship to start off, it's definitely not a bad start by any means, because now they're not immediately enemies right off the bat. If she believed him and was like, wait, you're Chainsaw Man, Yoru kicks in, brings up, and then just fight, boom, part over, one of them dies, and then they just fight right off the bat. So I really like this, how she doesn't believe him, and they're definitely going to have future interactions again, and maybe Denji will be like, okay, maybe I could get this girl if I just drop the whole Chainsaw Man thing. Maybe next time he sees her, I'm like, I was kidding, sorry about that, and tries to approach Asa from a more human side, and then they can, share their past experiences. Obviously, Denji can't share too much because it's like really, really freaking traumatic, and it will then really reveal these Chainsaw Men, but some way for these two to like meet up again after this moment and sort of maybe apologize to each other and have a more civilized conversation and see that they're really similar in a lot of ways. And then maybe that will bloom into a beautiful friendship, and then they'll love each other. And then that's never going to freaking happen because Fujimoto's twisted and he's demented, and he's going to write, Asa like ripping Denji's throat out or something like that. So yeah, just wishful thinking. Probably, yeah, there's not going to be, I don't know. That would be so nice though, if Denji, after all this time, he's never had a girlfriend in part 1. Makima ripped his freaking heart out, literally ripped his heart out of his chest, and I want Denji to get a W. I want Denji to get a girlfriend. I want him to experience true, genuine love and romance and affection from someone who really cares for him as well. And yeah, so at least in that regards, I still think Denji's motivation is very strong and very realistic, so I'm really rooting for him. I really hope Asa and him have like a second chance in a different interaction, and I'm really excited to see where this relationship is going to go from here. And I really like the way Fujimoto revealed it, with Denji being able to get that pent-up admission out, where he's like, I'm Chainsaw Man, finally I can say it, but she doesn't believe him. So maybe it'll make him feel better, being like, okay, I finally said it, she didn't believe me. Or maybe he'll do something even stupider and be like, how can I get her to believe me? Maybe I'll go on national TV and kill a devil and then reveal on TV. That would probably be the worst thing, and Yoshida probably wouldn't let him do that anyways, considering it's Yoshida's mission. So it'd be cool if Yoshida continued to wingman Denji, being like, Denji, just don't reveal yourself, don't worry, I'll talk to Asa, I'll put in a good word for you, and then we'll get you guys together. So yeah, and also Yuko's not in this chapter either. I forgot to mention that earlier, that she's still recovering from injuries, and makes sense because she wouldn't really fit into this chapter necessarily. So really like this trio that we have right now. I really want to see the more interactions between Denji and Asa. Maybe even, I think Denji and Yuko would be really good friends as well. Sorry, that was just like a hair floating. Sorry if that looks silly. But yeah, I'm really excited to see an interaction between Denji and Yuko as well, because they have really similar personalities, very loud and very outgoing. So I don't know, just so much potential awesome things happening in Chainsaw Man Part 2. But for now, that's the chapter, yeah. And he says, but I really am Chainsaw Man. She walks away, she doesn't believe him. And Yoshida, I guess, was gonna punish Denji, being like, Denji, I'm gonna have to force you to shut up if you say anything. But I guess no harm, no foul, because she doesn't believe him. So maybe Yoshida will give him a warning next chapter. But anyways, guys, that is going to be Chainsaw Man chapter 104 and 103 review and discussion. I hope you guys enjoyed the Chainsaw Man chapter reviews back. I will continue, maybe I'll do this more often, probably not. A lot of you guys were worried and were like, where's 103 review? So I guess I'll try to, review every single chapter regardless of the contents of it or how long it is. But yeah, it's nice being back talking about Chainsaw Man, and I'll see you guys in 2 weeks, I think. I don't think we have a date yet, but I guess Fujimoto is sticking to the bi-weekly, so I'll see you guys in the future with another Chainsaw Man Part 2 review. All right, thank you guys so much for watching. Like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe for more, and have a nice rest of your day. I'm out. Peace.